my great pleasure to introduce you to today's guest, Erica Delma. Erica is the Development Director at Holly Ridge Center. And I know we have several Holly Ridge folks on in this class, so welcome everyone. And Erica is a graduate of the Leadership Kitsap class of 2018, so she was in Ashley's class. And she's also the owner of Firefly Academy Preschool and was previously the Director of Development and Community Engagement for Olympic Peninsula YMCA. And I think, as it was mentioned before, if you know Erica, you know she is a person that daily practices gratitude. And when we were thinking of a speaker for this capacity, she quickly came to mind. So we're just really excited to get a chance to talk with you today, Erica. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to get us started. So if you don't mind, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to work in fundraising and development?
Sure. So Katie, you captured a lot of the different things that I've been lucky enough to do. And I feel like I came to work in fundraising and development because it's the absolute perfect marriage of my natural abilities and skill sets and what feeds my soul, honestly. As you mentioned, I had a preschool in Port Townsend, and so was really involved in the community. And I just want to touch on one thing Ashley said. One of the first steps in expressing gratitude is that pausing and noticing. And for all of you early childhood educators out there, or people who have been involved with little ones as a parent or grandparent, one thing that you may know or remember is that little kids, their world is right there in front of them. And it is the best practice of being present and available in the moment. It's phenomenal. And so I, as an adult, actually am working on revisiting that pause and noticing ability. But how I got involved in fund development was there was a massive community need where I lived, and the youth development programs were becoming unfunded. And I was like, hold on a sec here, wait a minute. And so that seemed really tragic in a way, because it was where I was living historically, was really where there was only one provider of youth development after school services, food services, safety net services. And by a chain of events and loss of funding due to a overall economic shortage, but a contract going away, it was well, we're going to have to shut this down. And so in my mind, I was like, well, wait a minute, we can figure this out. And so I think how I got into fund development was being really hopeful and optimistic. And at that time, probably somewhat naive, and quickly learned that really fund development is a mixture of being able to identify the need and then figure out what resources are potentially available, and really just telling the story and helping every person individually or organizationally figure out where they fit in. So lucky me that my job is to literally, I help identify needs through different channels, whether it's within our organization or within our community, and then be able to connect with people to say, hey, here's what's going on. What do you think? And how do we fit together to solve this greater problem? And so I definitely would, the why sent me to fundraising school and all that. But it was building off of, hey, we noticed you really have a propensity for this. Let's see what we can do. And I was like, okay. So how did I get into fund development? Was basically being really good at noticing what needs were. So that would probably start with the preschool. And then being really excited about connecting and helping individuals be part of something bigger than themselves.
Oh my gosh. And that fits so perfectly with just being present and gratitude, but also our capacity for community building, because that sounds exactly like what you're doing with the fund development. And so talking about our other capacities, and that kind of plays right into what you've already said too. But so what would you say is your purpose? What gets you up in the morning?
So this is excellent. Deidre knows, because I've been all about the purpose lately. like individual purpose, organizational purpose, like what is that get up and go. And so sometimes people overthink this, and I am like the president of the Overthinkers Club, just so in case you're wondering. But I think what gets me up and going in the morning is that I know that there's a way that together we can make things better. And I like literally, like I'm like, okay, so what are we gonna do today? And it might be simple, like connecting the dots, or like this person should know this person because they have something in common, and that's going to make them both feel good. And so my purpose is literally knowing that together we're better. And so I'm like, okay, so what do we do today?
Gosh, I love that so much. So, and hopefully I'm going to get this right. So Holly Ridge Center's mission is to enable children and adults with differing abilities to reach their fullest potential. So how does gratitude impact your work at Holly Ridge Center? You alluded to that a little bit in what fun development is and what you're doing, but how does gratitude impact your work?
So this is huge. And I am really a big fan and proponent of storytelling. And that means both our individual story and our organizational story. And as you know, everyone, right now, things look different in our world, like super different, right? And it would be really easy to focus on the things that we don't have or that are different. But when I take a step back and I recognize what the mission is at Holly Ridge, and I tell this to Deidre as well, and probably to everybody that will listen, like, hello, we are in the business of human development. Like, how phenomenal is that? And so even when people say, oh, I had this happen today, and it's really just a small win. But I had the privilege yesterday of being a guest in the infant toddler meeting and hearing a from the heart story of a client visit, and the person telling the story, and it was an electronic like telehealth visit, said was in that place of like, oh, it's just this little thing. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Like, the kid did what? And this happened. And so sometimes it's like a child says mama for the first time. And so really, how lucky is that? So gratitude is like really noticing all of those things that are seemingly little wins, but they're really tremendous and they're huge. And so I guess my biggest emphasis would be is if we all are able to take a tiny step back and pause and be like, those little things, those are the really big things. And so how incredibly fortuitous that I get to be able to do development work at Holly Ridge. And a tiny snippet of that story that is related to gratitude. I was reached out to by Holly Ridge Center's previous executive, and probably Deidre too, who was in the HR office. Deidre may have a better recollection of this, but it was actually at a time when my own father, and Katie knows this because I lost my dad in the beginning of leadership Kitsap, and it was really intense and really traumatic. And whoa, I had no idea. And this is reinforces the importance of gratitude. So let's tie these things together. I was in a hospital room. I got a phone call, and the phone call was, hey, I heard about you. You have experience in development work, specifically in community building capital projects, right? And you have a background in early education. And then they went kind of from there, and what Holly Ridge was, who Holly Ridge is. And I had an awareness of Holly Ridge because I had directed a little tiny preschool program off of Kitsap Way, like more than 20 years ago or something. Or no, it was 20 years ago because my 20-year-old was in it. So anyway, long story short is like, wait a minute, these are the two things that I'm passionate about, and I'm getting this phone call at a really weird time. And so I was so fortunate and so lucky that they were really awesome and patient. And I was able to start work at Holly Ridge and meld those two interests. So I feel like in my life, the more that I stay in a grateful place, which includes noticing all those small things, that things just gain momentum, and it's like they just go, go, go. And so that really ties into my practice of mindfulness, but also my conscious work on mindset. So we always have the opportunity to see things one way or another. But I just real quick, we'll touch back to my dad thing. My dad did not run positive his whole life. And I was always like the, the Susie Sunshine, like cheerleader kid who's like, I'm sure they were like, where did she come from? Neither of my parents particularly positive. But I remember my dad literally really engaging with me in the practice of gratitude during that season of our lives. And some days he was grateful that he was on the right side of the ground. And so when I'm in a funk, like a super funk, I just take a step back and I start with that. Grateful that I woke up. Grateful that I woke up in a temperature controlled environment. I mean, that in itself is huge. So I just start there and it just builds and it builds and it builds. And before you know it, you got a really long gratitude list.
Oh my gosh. So, what are some ways then that you practice gratitude daily? Like you said, like that's how you might get up, but what are some ways that you make it part of your daily routine?
So I'm very intentional about this, and I'm sure super annoying to some people on social media. I appreciate the positive feedback, Ashley. I have been told that people snooze me on purpose because they just can't handle it anymore. And I'm like, I kind of get sensitive sometimes. So I have to take a step and be like, that's okay. They can snooze me. That's fine. That's totally their choice, right? Like the gratitude practice is for me. So some ways that I remain accountable to myself is each day I do post, and sometimes it's first thing in the morning. Today it's going to be a little later. But I post like a handful of things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes they're really goofy things. And then at the end of the day, I post a handful of things that I'm grateful for. So those are kind of my bookends to the day. And then, so I also, in my breakout group, I was so lucky to be with Patrice and two amazing ladies from the Kitsap County Parks who I'm really grateful for what they're doing at the fairgrounds with the rescue mission. That's huge and life-changing. And Patrice talked about bullet journaling. I love being able to just jot down really quick, like in that moment, something I'm grateful for. And you just keep the momentum going. And it seems silly. And people often, I receive a lot of feedback. And I'm grateful for the feedback. And sometimes the feedback is like this. Oh yeah, well, if only we could all be so positive. And I'm like, guess what? It's actually something that you can manifest and you just have to practice it. Like practice, practice, practice. And sometimes, oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. But so I write down, like you guys were saying, I keep my electronic calendar, but I also, not very well, Deidre will be like, no, she doesn't. I put all kinds of stuff on there. It doesn't make sense. But I keep a paper calendar, and my paper calendar functions as also my journal because, like trees, I am not going to go and write all this like I don't know narrative and prose. That's kind of what I do, like if we're writing grants or whatnot. But I try to actually bullet point those out too. But I will go in and just pick like 3 things throughout the day, like what I'm grateful for, and that might be like I'm grateful for fresh salad or I'm grateful for a glass of water. But really, when you start thinking about those things, that is huge. So that we can access food and water, whoa, that's a big deal. So those are my practices. I try really hard to let people know specifically what I appreciate about them. So I often say to people, oh, I appreciate you, but I try to tie it to something very specific that I appreciate because sometimes that can feel to the receiver uncomfortable or awkward in a lot of different ways, or they may think that you're just like, my son says this term, and I don't know if this is like a millennial thing. He's like, are you just gassing me up? Meaning like, are you giving me like false praise? And I'm like, no, I'm not just gassing you up. I really mean this. And so I try to find a specific thing to give feedback on. And I try to do it often, and I try to do it laterally, like among peers, as well as give people that maybe my supervisor a genuine like feedback, not just like, hey, great job, high five, Deidre, but something specific that she does that makes a difference, or I noticed, or it resonates, or whatever. And then same things for the people that I work with.
Well, I think that also just really speaks to, again, to the capacity of authenticity, because then for gratitude to be received. It probably needs to be really authentic too. So that's what you do. And so you talked a little bit about what you do. So what do you think some advice for people in this class for like at the workplace or with their lead, like how can they practice leadership? Can they practice gratitude as part of their leadership? Like how can they lead in gratitude?
So I think a tiny minute ago I said, like, don't overthink it. Just start with one tiny thing, like one little thing, and be consistent with it for your own self. And what you'll find is people are like, oh, sometimes they think I just get so excited about so many things, but it's like genuine excitement. I for real get that excited about it because it's contagious. So if you want to practice it at work, just like a bad attitude is contagious and it will dampen the mood and dampen the environment. Um, Pick one tiny little small thing, a little thing, and just build off of that. And what you'll find is other people will join you in it because it actually feels better than being on the what's wrong side. Sometimes that takes time depending on what your culture is, because it depends on what the values are, how people have previously been invited to show up. But I say the big thing there is the invitation. The invitation is to really show appreciation and to notice what's going right. I mean, like I said, there's so many things right now that we have zero control over, like no control over. But how refreshing to know that I actually have control over my attitude. Like that's phenomenal. And so I think as leaders, come from your place of power, and I mean that in a good way. And so leading by example, not overthinking, and picking one thing, like one genuine thing that you can do each way. I love, 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 love the leaving note idea. So I have a challenge, which is super funny. Not funny. So lucky that it's part of my job to thank people and to let them know exactly how they made an impact. So lucky. Katie, you are phenomenal at sending thank you cards. Phenomenal. So sometimes, unless I legit like have the stamp out and the envelope addressed, I am so grateful that I have an amazing team that puts it like it gets it into the mailbox or like that kind of thing, because there's gaps. So make it easy. I loved the like sticky note thing. I sometimes just jot down like on a sticky note what I appreciate about someone and like stick it somewhere where they can see it. Funny story is I have a coworker who I appreciate very much, who I told about a nightmare that someone had left me sticky notes. Someone who shall remain nameless. This is a nightmare. It didn't happen for real. Someone had left me sticky notes on double-sided tape across my office door. So it was like a spider web that I couldn't go in, with all the things that they were really frustrated about me, right? So I told my coworker this, and the next time I went to work into the office, this is before COVID, he's also a leadership Kitsap graduate. He had taken sticky notes and put all the things that he appreciated about me all over my door. And so I was like, it made me feel so good. I'm never taking them down, but simple things like that. Like you can find something to appreciate about anyone, even the stuff that like makes you cuckoo. There's probably something good in there.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's a choice. You can choose to be grateful.
Yeah.
So, anything else before we open up to questions that you want to add about living in gratitude? And I love that you have the sunflowers and the sunshine behind you.
Thanks.
All that positivity.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing about living in gratitude is also, and this is something I'm working on, so much working on every day. I totally like when someone talked about receiving compliments. So, understanding that there's a level of like not of reciprocity and momentum there, and not only being able to express gratitude to others, but being able to receive gratitude. And so for me, that fits with the idea of graciousness and giving yourself grace. And so if gratitude is a new practice for you, I would say give yourself grace. It's a skill. That's why we practice it. And people are always like, so I'm not just so grateful. I practice gratitude. Like I practice every single day. So yeah, I guess
practicing it. Yeah. Because
I'm practicing. So I give myself grace because I mess it up sometimes. Dang, I have a lot of things in my brain sometimes that they don't sound very grateful.
I love it. So we're going to open it up now. So if you have any questions for Erica or maybe some ideas or any just comments, please share. We have that uncomfortable Zoom silence while we get someone to ask a question.
I'm like, it's cool, no problem.
The Ferris Bueller Day Off, right? Anyone? You'll get a question.
I just wanted to read the chat while we're
yeah, thank you.
Reflecting and on our gratitude. But there's one from Debbie, Erica. I would never snooze you, Erica. You got some love in the chat room there.
Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate that. But it's kind of funny, right? Like I appreciate. So I'm grateful that people tell me that they snooze me. I mean, right? And that helps me recognize, this is a good self-awareness thing, that helps me recognize that when I come in all like raring to go and excited about what are we doing, that may not be what the rest of the room is feeling. They might be like, listen, I snoozed you because I can't deal with this right now. So I'm grateful for the feedback.
Well, I do think like this is a heavy time for everybody, and so it's hard to practice gratitude, and it's like, okay, let me try and find something that I can be thankful for right now. And so I think it's a practice, and I think it's and I get that, but I think it's necessary. It's a good reminder too of what we could be grateful for. Yeah. Anyone else comment or thought?
So we have a question in the chat.
All right.
And this is from Emma. Erica, can we follow you on social media? And if so, what's your screen name and on which platforms?
I'm just me. I'm just Erica Delma on Facebook and on Instagram. And yes, of course, absolutely.
Erica, this is Patrice here.
Hi, Patrice.
I don't have a question, but I do have a shout out just because I know I shared in small groups that I recently started bullet journaling. I have to give super shout out to Carlita. I don't know if you're here today, but I met Carlita in this Thrive group, and she's the person who introduced me to bullet journaling, and it has been epic.
I love it.
I love that, Patrice.
An example of expressing gratitude.
Yeah.
Patrice.
That was incredible, Patrice. Two things, and I know, Katie, we're probably running out of time, but I was in the breakout group with Patrice, and you guys have to forgive me because I tried to remember names really fast, and I usually am very good at this, but the two amazing ladies from County Parks who, as I mentioned, they're doing the mission shelter out there right now. And I just know that where I live is a thoroughfare generally for people who are without homes and living somewhat of a transient lifestyle. And I'm sure that you don't always hear like the immediate feedback or gratitude from people that are benefiting from services and whatnot. But there's a few people that I know by name because we're familiar and we're neighbors generally. But when I don't see them for a while, I get worried. And so I've seen a couple people that I'm familiar with, and they let me know that they have been living in the shelter up at the fairgrounds, and how for them that's been really life-changing to have that access to services, to have dry shelter. And so I want to express gratitude in this big group because that's phenomenal. And so when people are like, oh, this is so awful, there's so much. Yes, there is so much. It's so heavy. It's so awful. And there are some really good things coming out of our reality, like that phenomenal collaboration to make that happen. So I just want to say, like, sometimes it's a stretch, but try to notice the stuff that happens in the face of disaster, or in the face, I mean, like Deidre always says, I love this so much, Deidre. She always says, look for the helpers, like for real. And that's Mr. Rogers. I know we got that from that guy, but yeah, anyway, so I talked a lot, but I just really wanted to express gratitude for that. But pick a small thing, and then just build off of that. And sometimes I wanted to invite you all before we sign off, and we don't have to share out loud, but if you want to just drop in the chat one thing that you're grateful for today, and one thing you're going to do to show gratitude to somebody else.
I love that. So we can practice. And I love that you mentioned that it's a continual practice of gratitude. And this is like the perfect time for us to really start, if you haven't started, to begin that practice of gratitude and to share it out. So, oh my goodness, Erica, you're just such a great example of all of this. And
I practice.
So we're so thankful that you're here today. Thank you so much. And I love her point. So if you have any other comments, put it in the chat. She'll be sticking around for a little bit. And maybe think about that as we go into our next break. So thank you.